Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, by Greg McKeown. Introduction. Imagine this for a moment. Your beautiful newborn daughter is just hours old, resting in your wife's tired, loving arms in a quiet hospital room. It should be one of the happiest, most serene days of your life. A moment of pure, uninterrupted peace. But your phone keeps buzzing. Your email is filling up. There's a client meeting, and a colleague has even half-jokingly written to you, "It would be a bad time to have a baby because I need you at this meeting." Even though every part of you knows where you should be, a powerful pressure pulls you in another direction. The pressure to please. The pressure to be seen as reliable. The pressure to not let the team down. So, with a heavy heart, you say yes. To your shame, you leave your wife and your hours-old baby in that hospital room. And you go to the meeting. You walk in, expecting the client to be impressed by your dedication. But instead, their faces just mirror how you feel inside. They look at you and you can see them thinking, "What are you doing here?" And in that moment, you realize you've made a terrible trade. You sacrificed what was most important for something that, in the grand scheme of things, meant absolutely nothing. In fact, nothing at all came of that meeting. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. This is the true story of Greg McKeown, the author of the book we're going to explore today, Essentialism. And that painful experience taught him a lesson that would change his life, and the lives of millions of others, forever. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. Hello, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a book that isn't just a productivity guide, it's a philosophy for living. Essentialism has sold millions of copies and has been translated into languages all over the world, not because it offers clever life hacks, but because it addresses a deep, universal feeling so many of us share: the feeling of being busy, but not productive. Of being overworked, but underutilized. Of constantly being in motion, but never really getting anywhere. Greg McKeown, a brilliant strategist who has worked with some of the most successful companies in Silicon Valley, found himself trapped in this exact cycle. His own success had become a paradox. The more opportunities that came his way, the more his focus shattered, and the less impact he was actually making. So he set out on a mission to find a different way. A better way. A way to escape the undisciplined pursuit of more and embrace what he calls the disciplined pursuit of less. And that is my promise to you today. Over the next little while, we are going to walk the path of the Essentialist together. You're going to discover a powerful, life-altering framework for identifying what is absolutely essential in your life, eliminating everything that is not, and building a system that makes doing the most important things almost effortless. This isn't about getting more done. It's about getting the right things done. So, find a quiet space, take a deep breath, and let's begin our journey into the heart of Essentialism. Book summary. Let's start with a simple drawing. Imagine a circle, and inside that circle is all of your time and energy for a day. Now, for most people, for the non-essentialist, as McKeown would say, that energy looks like a firework exploding. Little arrows of effort shoot out in every direction. An arrow for that email, an arrow for that meeting you didn't need to be in, an arrow for that favor you said yes to, an arrow for scrolling through social media. At the end of the day, you've used up all your energy, but you've only made a millimeter of progress in a million different directions. You feel exhausted, but you look back and wonder, what did I actually accomplish? Now, imagine a different circle. This is the Essentialist circle. Here, all of that same energy is channeled into a single, powerful arrow, moving in one clear direction. The result isn't a tiny bit of progress everywhere, it's a massive breakthrough on the one thing that truly matters. This, right here, is the core difference between a life lived by default and a life lived by design. The non-essentialist is a victim of other people's agendas. The essentialist is the author of their own. But how do we get there? It feels like the world is conspiring against us. McKeown argues that we're caught in a perfect storm of non-essentialism. First, we have too many choices. For the first time in human history, we have an almost infinite number of things we could be doing, and it's overwhelming. Psychologists call it decision fatigue. The more choices we make, the worse the quality of our decisions becomes. Second, there's too much social pressure. Technology hasn't just given us information overload, it's given us opinion overload. Everyone has an idea of what we should be doing, what we should care about, what we should say yes to. And third, there's the most dangerous myth of all, the idea that you can have it all. We're told we can be a perfect parent, a top-performing employee, a pillar of the community, stay in perfect shape, and have a rich social life, all at the same time. This myth has led to the absurd reality of talking about our priorities, plural. But the word priority, McKeown points out, was singular for 500 years. It meant the very first thing. The prior thing. By changing the word, we tried to bend reality, to believe we could have multiple first things. But we can't. And when we try to do it all, we end up making trade-offs we would never choose consciously. We trade away family time for another meeting. We trade away our health for one more project. We trade away our peace of mind for the fleeting approval of others. The way out of this trap begins with a profound internal shift. It's an awakening to three core truths. The first truth is the invincible power of choice. McKeown tells a story from early in his life. He was in law school in England, not because he was passionate about it, but because everyone told him it was a good way to keep his options open. He was miserable, straddling his law studies with his real passions for writing and thinking about leadership. He was succeeding at nothing. Then, on a spontaneous trip to America, a mentor said something to him that changed everything. It wasn't a piece of advice, it was an assumption. He said, "If you decide to stay." In that moment, McKeown realized that while he logically knew he could quit law school, he had never truly felt it was an option. He had forgotten his power to choose. By not choosing, he had inadvertently chosen a path he didn't want. He had become helpless. Researchers call this learned helplessness. In a classic experiment, dogs were given small electric shocks. One group could press a lever to stop the shock. The other group had a lever that did nothing. Later, when both groups were put in a box where they could easily escape the shock by stepping over a small barrier, the dogs who'd had the working lever jumped to safety. But the dogs who had been powerless just lay there and took the shock. They had learned that their choices didn't matter. We do this to ourselves. We say, "I have to go to this meeting," or "I have to answer this email." We forget that in almost every case, we are choosing to. The moment you replace "I have to" with "I choose to," you take your power back. This is the first, most fundamental step. We may not always control our options, but we always control how we choose among them. The second truth is the unimportance of practically everything. This sounds harsh, but it's liberating. We've been taught that effort and results have a one-to-one relationship. Work harder, get more. But the world doesn't work that way. McKeown introduces us to the Pareto principle, the idea that roughly 20% of our efforts produce 80% of our results. This isn't just a business cliché, it's a law of nature. A few things are vital, most are trivial. Think of Warren Buffett, who famously said his investment philosophy borders on lethargy. He doesn't make hundreds of investments. He makes a tiny number of big bets on businesses he is absolutely sure of, and he holds them. In fact, 90% of his immense wealth comes from just 10 investments. He understands that what you don't do is just as important as what you do. The non-essentialist thinks almost everything is important. They see all opportunities as roughly equal. The essentialist understands that almost everything is noise, and only a very few things are exceptionally valuable. Their job is not to manage everything, but to discern the vital few from the trivial many. This leads to the third truth, the reality of trade-offs. You cannot have it all. You cannot do it all. The non-essentialist asks, how can I do both? The essentialist asks a tougher, more honest question. Which problem do I want? McKeown tells the story of Southwest Airlines. For decades, in an industry famous for losing money, Southwest was consistently profitable. How? Because its founder, Herb Kelleher, was a master of trade-offs. He was totally clear on what Southwest was, a low-cost airline. So he made deliberate choices. No meals. No assigned seats. No first-class service. Just point-to-point flights at the lowest possible price. Did he alienate customers who wanted a meal or a fancy seat? Absolutely. But he didn't care. He wasn't trying to be everything to everyone. He was choosing to be one thing, and to be the best at it. When their competitors, like Continental Airlines, tried to copy them, they failed miserably. They tried to straddle their strategy. They kept their expensive, full-service model but also tried to offer a cheap, no-frills service called Continental Light. It was a disaster. They were trying to be two things at once, and they ended up being good at neither. They ignored the reality of trade-offs. Saying yes to one thing requires saying no to another. Every single time. When we don't choose, someone else chooses for us. Our boss, our colleagues, our clients, even our families. And we end up living a straddled life, just like Continental Airlines, making sacrifices by default that we would never have made by design. Once you have absorbed these three truths, choice, the vital few, and trade-offs, you are ready to begin the disciplined pursuit of less. McKeown breaks this down into a simple three-step process you can apply to every part of your life: explore, eliminate, and execute. The first step is to explore. This is the art of discerning the vital few from the trivial many. And paradoxically, essentialists actually explore more options than non-essentialists. The non-essentialist gets excited by every idea and jumps on it without thinking. The essentialist systematically explores a wide range of options so they can be sure they are choosing the absolute best one to go big on. To do this, you first need to create space. In our hyper-connected world, we have lost the time to simply think. Frank O'Brien, the founder of a fast-growing company, initiated a radical practice. One full day a month, he brings his entire team into a room with no phones, no email, and no agenda. The purpose is simply to escape, to think, and to talk. He says if his people are too busy to think, then they're too busy, period. We have to design this space into our lives. Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, schedules up to 2 hours of blank space on his calendar every single day. He says it's his single most valuable productivity tool. Bill Gates famously takes a Think Week twice a year, where he secludes himself to do nothing but read and think about the bigger picture. You don't need a full week. You can start with 20 minutes of reading classic literature in the morning instead of checking your email. The goal is to escape the reactive noise so you can hear the signal. As you create space, you must learn to look for what really matters. McKeown shares a beautiful story about the late writer Nora Ephron. In her high school journalism class, the teacher, Charlie Sims, gave the students a set of facts. The principal announced that the entire faculty would be traveling to Sacramento next Thursday for a colloquium on new teaching methods, featuring famous speakers like Margaret Mead. The students all dutifully wrote their leads, summarizing the who, what, when, and where. Mr. Sims told them they were all wrong. The lead to the story, he said, was this: there will be no school Thursday. In that instant, Efron realized that journalism wasn't just about regurgitating facts, it was about figuring out the point. It was about seeing what truly mattered to people. An essentialist is a journalist of their own life. They look past the extraneous details to find the lead story. They don't just see the dots of each day, they connect them to see the trends. A key part of exploration is play. We're taught from a young age that play is trivial, childish, a waste of time. But Stuart Brown, the founder of the National Institute for Play, has studied thousands of people and concluded that play is essential for a healthy, innovative life. Play isn't the opposite of work, it's the fuel for it. It broadens our options, it's an antidote to stress, and it stimulates the creative, exploratory parts of our brain. And finally, to explore effectively, you must sleep. McKeown calls it protecting the asset. The best asset you have for making a contribution to the world is you, your mind, your body, your spirit. And the most common way we damage that asset is by neglecting sleep. He tells the powerful story of a driven, successful CEO named Jeff who traveled constantly and averaged 4 to 6 hours of sleep a night. He was on top of his game, until his body started shutting down. It started with panic-like attacks, then his heart rate became erratic, and eventually he could barely stand up. His doctor gave him 2 choices: take medication for the rest of his life, or disengage from everything for a year or 2 to recover. He had burned out his most important asset. We live in a culture that celebrates sleep deprivation as a badge of honor. But the research is clear: sleep is a driver of peak performance. In a famous study of violinists, the single biggest factor separating the best from the good wasn't just practice, it was sleep. The top performers slept an average of 8.6 hours a night, plus naps. Sleep allows the brain to make new connections, to solve problems, and to see clearly. As McKeown says, our highest priority must be to protect our ability to prioritize. Once you have explored your options, the final filter is to select with extreme criteria. This is where the mantra "if it isn't a clear yes, then it's a clear no" comes in. McKeown suggests the 90% rule. As you evaluate an opportunity, think about the single most important criterion for that decision and give the option a score between 0 and 100. If you rate it any lower than 90%, then automatically change the rating to 0 and reject it. This simple rule prevents you from getting stuck with the 6s and 7s. It forces you to wait for the 9s and 10s. It's about trading a plethora of good things for the few truly great ones. This brings us to the second major step in the process: eliminate. Once you have identified the vital few, you must have the courage to cut out the trivial many. This starts with having a crystal clear purpose, what McKeown calls an essential intent. Most corporate mission statements are vague, jargon-filled platitudes that inspire no one. Think of a company that says its mission is profitable growth through superior customer service, innovation, quality, and commitment. It's meaningless. An essential intent, by contrast, is both inspirational and concrete. It's one decision that settles 1,000 later decisions. When the British Prime Minister asked Martha Lane Fox to be the UK's first digital champion, she could have written a long, boring job description. Instead, she and her team created an essential intent: to get everyone in the UK online by the end of 2012 inches. Simple, concrete, inspiring, measurable. That clarity empowered everyone on her team to say no to anything that didn't serve that one clear goal. With that clarity, you must then learn to dare, to use the power of a graceful no. This is often the hardest part, because we are wired to get along with others. We fear social awkwardness. We don't want to disappoint people. McKeown tells a beautiful story about Stephen R. Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He had planned a special date night with his 12-year-old daughter, Cynthia, in San Francisco. They had an entire evening mapped out, down to the minute. But as they were leaving a convention, he ran into an old friend who enthusiastically invited them both to a fancy seafood dinner. Cynthia's heart sank. She imagined her perfect evening evaporating. But then her father, after greeting his friend warmly, said, "But not tonight. Cynthia and I have a special date planned, don't we?" He took her hand, and they ran off to have an unforgettable night. Cynthia told McKeown that in that moment, her father bonded himself to her forever, because she knew that what mattered most to him was her. That is the power of a no that is fueled by a yes to something more important. A clear no can be more graceful than a vague, non-committal yes. We must learn to separate the decision from the relationship. Denying the request is not denying the person. Sometimes, even after we've said no, we are still trapped by past commitments. This is where we must learn to uncommit. We are all susceptible to what psychologists call sunk cost bias, the tendency to keep investing in something, even a losing proposition, simply because we've already invested so much. McKeown uses the Concorde jet as a prime example. It was an engineering marvel but a complete financial failure. Yet for decades, the British and French governments kept pouring billions into it, long after they knew they would never make the money back. The more they invested, the harder it was to let go. We do this in our own lives. We stay in a job that makes us miserable because we've already spent 5 years there. We keep pouring money into a project that isn't working. To escape this trap, we must ask ourselves a powerful question. If I weren't already invested in this, how much would I invest in it now? The answer is often zero. We have to have the courage to admit failure in order to begin success. We must also learn to edit our lives. Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter and Square, says he thinks of the role of CEO as being the chief editor of the company. An editor doesn't just say no. They use deliberate subtraction to add life and clarity to the work. As Stephen King famously said, "You must kill your darlings, even when it breaks your egocentric little scribbler's heart, kill your darlings." Editing our lives means cutting out good options to make space for great ones. It means condensing our efforts, so that every action counts for more. And finally, to eliminate the non-essential, we must learn to set limits. In our always-on world, boundaries have been erased. Work has crept insidiously into family life. An essentialist sees boundaries not as constraints, but as a source of liberation. McKeown shares the story of a school located next to a busy road. The children would only play in a small area near the building, where the teachers could watch them. But then, someone built a fence around the entire playground. Suddenly, the children were free to play anywhere and everywhere. The boundary didn't limit their freedom, it expanded it. When we don't set boundaries, we are imprisoned by the limits others set for us. When we have clear boundaries, we are free to operate in the space we have deliberately chosen. This brings us to the third and final stage: execute. Once you have explored your options and eliminated the non-essentials, how do you make doing the vital few things almost effortless? The first key is to build in a buffer. We live in an unpredictable world. The only thing we can expect is the unexpected. A non-essentialist assumes a best-case scenario and is constantly thrown into chaos when things go wrong. An essentialist expects the unexpected and prepares for it. The story of Joseph in Egypt is a perfect example. He interpreted the Pharaoh's dream to mean 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. So he advised the Pharaoh to store 1/5 of the harvest during the good years as a buffer. When the famine came, Egypt was saved. We can create buffers in our own lives. The simplest way is to add 50% to any time estimate you make. If you think a project will take 2 hours, block out 3. This simple practice relieves the stress of running late and creates space for the unexpected. It's the difference between driving 1 inch behind the car in front of you at 100 miles per hour and leaving a safe distance. One is stressful and dangerous, the other is calm and controlled. Next, we must learn to subtract obstacles instead of just adding more effort. McKeown tells the story from the business parable The Goal, where a scout leader, Alex, is trying to get his troop of boys to a campsite. The problem is, one boy, Herbie, is incredibly slow, and the group gets spread out over miles. At first, Alex tries to get the fast boys to wait up. But as soon as they start walking again, the gap reappears. Then he has an insight. He puts Herbie, the slowest hiker, at the very front of the line. Now, the whole troop moves at Herbie's pace. The key is no longer to get the fast boys to speed up, but to do everything possible to make things easier for Herbie. Alex takes weight out of Herbie's backpack and distributes it among the other boys. Instantly, Herbie's pace improves, and therefore, the speed of the entire group improves. What is the slowest hiker in your life? What is the single biggest obstacle holding you back from what is essential? Instead of piling on more effort, focus all your energy on removing that one constraint. When you do, everything else becomes easier. An essentialist produces more not by doing more, but by removing more. To make execution effortless, you also need to harness the power of progress. The most effective form of human motivation is making progress, even in small wins. In Richmond, Canada, a new police superintendent named Ward Clapham was facing high rates of youth crime. Instead of just cracking down harder, he created a program called Positive Tickets. Police officers started catching young people doing something good, like wearing a helmet or throwing trash in a bin, and giving them a ticket redeemable for a reward, like a movie pass. Over a decade, this simple system of rewarding small, positive actions reduced recidivism from 60% to just 8%. Instead of going for one big, flashy win, Clapham started small and built momentum. When we start small and celebrate progress, we create a positive feedback loop that makes the essential path the easiest path. This leads directly to the genius of routine, which McKeown calls flow. The non-essentialist thinks execution requires raw, forced effort every time. The essentialist designs a routine that makes the essential the default position. Think of the Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps. For years, he followed the exact same routine before every single race, from the stretches he did, to the music he listened to the way he stepped onto the starting block. His coach also gave him a mental routine. Every night before bed and every morning upon waking, he would visualize the perfect race in slow motion. He did this for years. By the time he stood on the block for a real race, winning felt like the natural extension of a routine he had already successfully completed 1,000 times. The right routine removes the friction of decision-making. Our brain's resources are finite. When we create a routine for the essentials, they become automatic, freeing up our mental energy to focus on new challenges and creative thinking. Finally, to execute on what's essential, you must learn to focus on what's important now. This is the mantra of Larry Jellicks, a high school rugby coach with one of the most incredible winning records in sports history, 418 wins and only 10 losses. He teaches his players to constantly ask themselves, what's important now? Not the last play they messed up. Not the final score. But this moment. This play. The ancient Greeks had two words for time: chronos, which is chronological, ticking time, and kairos, which is opportune, qualitative time. Kairos is experienced only when we are fully in the moment. The non-essentialist is always stuck in chronos, their mind spinning about the past or worrying about the future. The essentialist learns to live in kairos. They know that the only time they can truly act is now. This isn't about multitasking, it's about multi-focusing, which is impossible. We can't concentrate on two things at the same time. When we are truly present, our execution becomes not only more effective, but more joyful. This brings us to the final, most important idea. Essentialism is not something you do. It's something you are. To live an essential life is to be an essentialist. McKeown points to Mohandas K. Gandhi as a powerful example. He began his life with a clear path to becoming a wealthy lawyer. But a journey to South Africa awakened him to a higher, more essential purpose: the liberation of the oppressed. From that moment on, he began a process he called reducing himself to zero. He eliminated everything that was not essential to his mission. He wore his own homespun cloth. He spent a day a week in silence. He owned fewer than 10 items when he died. His life was a testament to the power of a single, essential focus. Most of us have a little essentialist and a little non-essentialist inside us. The question is, which is your major, and which is your minor? When you start to live this way, you don't just add a few good habits. The very core of who you are begins to change. The choices become easier. The no becomes more natural. The joy in the journey becomes deeper. You begin to realize that this one, wild and precious life is not a dress rehearsal. Every day, every choice, is the real thing. And you are faced with a fundamental question. Will you look back on your life and see a long laundry list of trivial accomplishments, or will you see a few things that truly mattered? The life of an essentialist is a life lived without regret. Because when you have correctly identified what is essential, and you have invested your whole self in it, you can be proud of the life you have chosen to live. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through essentialism, it's worth pausing to think about why this message feels so urgent right now, especially for someone your age, standing at the threshold of so many important life decisions. We live in a world that celebrates being busy. We've somehow confused activity with achievement. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor and brag about how little we sleep. But as Greg McKeown so powerfully argues, this is a fool's bargain. It's the path of the non-essentialist, a path that leads to a life that is full, but ultimately, unfulfilling. The most powerful lesson in this book, for me, is the quiet revolution it proposes. It's a revolution against the noise, the pressure, and the endless demands of the modern world. It's the quiet courage to say no thank you to good opportunities so you can say a resounding yes to the truly great ones. It's the wisdom to understand that contribution is not about doing more, but about doing what matters most. For a young person today, the pressure to pad your resume, to join every club, to be on every social media platform, and to keep your options open is immense. But essentialism offers a liberating alternative. It gives you permission to be selective. It gives you permission to choose a path, not because it's what everyone else is doing, but because it is the one where you can make your absolute highest point of contribution. This book isn't about becoming a minimalist who owns nothing. It's about becoming a maximalist on the things that matter. It's about investing your precious time and energy so deliberately that your life, instead of being a scattered mess of small commitments, becomes a masterpiece of focused intention. So, how can you start living this way, today? You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. Remember the power of small wins. Here are 3 simple things you can try this week. First, for the next 7 days, before you say yes to any new request, no matter how small, just pause. Take 5 seconds. In that pause, ask yourself, is this truly essential, or am I just saying yes out of guilt, pressure, or a fear of missing out? That simple pause can be the difference between a choice you regret and a choice you celebrate. Second, identify your slowest hiker this week. Think about your schoolwork, your goals, or even your personal life. What is the one obstacle that, if you removed it, would make everything else feel easier? Don't try to fix everything at once. Just focus on removing that one single constraint. And third, schedule 30 minutes of do-nothing time. No phone, no computer, no music. Just you and your thoughts. You might find it uncomfortable at first. But in that silence, you'll start to hear the quiet signal through all the loud noise. The journey of an essentialist is not an easy one. It takes courage to go against the grain. But the reward is a life that isn't just successful, but significant. It's a life of clarity, of control, and of deep, abiding joy in the journey. That was a summary of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, by Greg McKeown. We've explored the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only be a map. The real magic happens when you walk the path yourself. It's in the quiet moments when a particular story or a simple phrase hits you in a way you didn't expect, and you see your own life with fresh eyes. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you live your one precious life. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together. Thank you for listening.